Awesome. Okay.
Ready?
Yep. Let's go. Let's laugh. We are imperfect after all.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Imperfect Us podcast.
I'm Leanne Camilleri.
And I'm Lisa Downs. As hosts of the Imperfect Us podcast, we share relatable stories that celebrate we are all perfectly imperfect humans, leading perfectly imperfect lives. We discover practical and evidence-based strategies that draw on the science of well-being and positive psychology that help us to uncover the barriers that might hold us back from being our authentic selves and turn them into opportunities so that we can show up more consistently, doing what we really aspire to do and who we want to be.
We acknowledge the Wadawurrung and the Kaurna people as traditional custodians of the beautiful lands on which this podcast is being recorded. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend this respect to other First Nations people who are here with us today. So, let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Imperfect Us podcast. Today we are thrilled to be speaking with Sue Langley, who is the CEO and founder of the Langley Group, who is dedicated to inspiring people to realise their potential through positive, evidence-based personal and professional development. She travels the globe engaging people from all walks of life. Her ability to energise teams for change, develop resilience and wellbeing in others, and to inspire leaders to be the best that they can be, makes her one of the most sought after speakers in the field. Sue has worked with thousands of business leaders, HR professionals, managers and consultants to help them learn how to harness their brain's potential, to create positive workplace cultures and increase performance and productivity. Sue specialises in the practical application of neuroscience, emotional intelligence and positive psychology to inspire people to be their best selves and for their peers and their teams. All right, well, hello and welcome, Sue. We are really stoked to be speaking with you today. And we're just wondering if you would like to share what led you to do the wonderful work that you're doing at the Langley Group.
It's a great question, and thank you. It is an honour to be here with you. If I think about what led me to do it, well, I think if I go back however many years ago, I did a program back in 1997 that was, I suppose you would call it was a professional development program, but it had some positive psychology themes in it, shall we say, and some personal development aspects. And during that program, I got really clear on my own personal purpose, vision, and values. So that's pretty much what led me here. So I decided back in 1997 that my purpose in life was to breathe spirit into the minds of others to help them achieve their level of excellence. That was and still is, that's my personal purpose statement, I suppose, of why I do what I do. And then I've pretty much designed my life around my purpose, my vision, my values.
And you do that so well, Sue. And you even developed a wonderful diploma which I had the honour of taking several years ago as part of your mission.
Yeah, look, absolutely. My ethos around my whole business, which we've been in business 20 years now, and the ethos was, for me personally, if we think about why I did what I did, Lisa, your question is, for my personal purpose, vision and values, but I wanted to create a business that basically took the science and made it real for people, Leanne. So if you think about why I created the diploma, again, my whole ethos in the business is to take the science of emotions, the science of positive psychology and the neuroscience, and then bring it to life in practical ways. And when we launched the diploma back in 2013, I think it was, there was only one option to study positive psychology, and that was a master's at Penn. And we wanted to make something that wasn't a master's program. We wanted to make it that it was real and it was practical for real people, whether you were a ER doctor or an HR practitioner or a coach or a personal trainer, whoever you were. We wanted to bring the science and make it accessible. And again, in my mind, my job is to synthesize the science. So I like to take the research and the research papers, I've got them literally dotted all around me. I read research papers pretty much every day. And then I try and bring them to life and say, well, what does this mean for us normal people in normal lives?
The very first time I saw you present was at the Positive Psychology Conference in Adelaide. What struck me was that real self-awareness that you had in how you could be your best self for all of us in that moment. And I really admired that.
Well, it's interesting then, because obviously that's still something we practice in our business around the whole strengths-based approach. Everybody does their strengths every year. We have conversations around strengths, and we're certainly not perfect. One of the things that we do, though, is we try and job craft around the strengths. So I know for me, my strengths are around spotlight, narrator, mission, legacy, centered. I can lead my team, and you can put me on stage in front of 10,000 people, and I'm happily going to share stories. It's one of the reasons why I do a diploma 6 days face-to-face by myself facilitating, because that's what energizes me. You know, sometimes I'll get to the diploma and at the end of day 2 someone will say to me, "Oh, you must be so exhausted already. You've got 4 more days to go." And I'm like, why would I be exhausted? This is awesome. But to that point, there are other people in my team. For instance, adherence is a weakness for me. And yet I've got 2 people in my team who it's a top strength, which means they do all the really cool stuff around the diploma, such as the compliance and the reports and all the things that need to happen to get people in front of me and to follow up and make sure we comply with the government sort of criteria, I suppose. You know, if I take one new person in my team, she's been with us, well, she's not new now. In fact, the last 2 that we brought in, their jobs have changed considerably, because once they've settled in and understand what the business is about, we then go, okay, where are your strengths? What do you want to do more of? What do you want to do less of? We're just recruiting for somebody else right now. And I know that the job that they take on will not be the job that they have a year from now, because it's really cool to say, okay, these are your strengths. This is how it works with this current role. Now you know about the business. What other things do you want to leverage? And that's really lovely. It's job crafting on steroids.
It's such a beautiful way to work with your colleagues as well in sharing their strengths, but also enabling them to lift their performance, because, you know, they're using their strengths so that they're enjoying it more and wanting to contribute a little bit more because of that. You know, that's a lovely way to run an organization.
Yeah, and to your point, you know, one lovely girl who joined us, as I say, 2 years ago, Dana, she's amazing. This was the first corporate job that she'd had, and she didn't really have a huge amount of skills apart from customer service. She'd worked in a shop as a shop assistant, you know, for a few, you know, part-time Saturdays, etc. And she started doing admin, posting the products that we sell and printing and those sorts of things. And yet now she took on so much extra effort. She wanted to get more into the creative side, so she started doing our workbooks. We gave her 10 hours worth of time with a trainer on InDesign. But since then, she's picked up things for herself. She's learned how to do Photoshop. She's learned how to do various editing, because she loves it. And so, you know, it's awesome to see how she's evolved, and it's awesome to see what she's added to the business. You know, she's just done 14 edited recordings of all between somewhere around 30 and 45 minutes for us, that's going on to a couple of online portals for our clients. And she's done pretty much all of that by herself. And that's from somebody who just thought, oh, I'd love to take that on. And we gave her a go. She gave us a go. And yeah, the extra effort, the discretionary effort you get, I guess, when someone is playing to their strengths is pretty clever.
Yeah.
Lovely. And how fortunate are organisations that work that way in drawing off of each other's strengths?
Yeah, it helps you understand, is someone in the right role? And sometimes as a leader, your job is to help them get a role that suits their strengths, even if it's outside your organization. But when you see a team that does play to their strengths and uses the whole sort of positive psychology and positive organizational scholarship ethos, it's quite cool what results they can get.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the ripple effect to everybody is, you know, so beautiful and energizing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's lovely within our team when we see people flourish. Like another team member, she started a year ago and she's just moved back to Bali, where she lived before COVID. And she doesn't want to leave us, but she has to, because part of her job is actually here in Byron Bay and it's physical. So we've morphed her job that there are going to be, once she's settled in, some things that she'll still do for us virtually, even though we're going to need to recruit somebody else to do the face-to-face stuff here. So again, it's lovely when you see that connection that's built as well, when people enjoy what they do and they get attached to what you're doing.
Yeah. When we think about the reason why we're here, we have been talking about how our imposter thoughts can either hinder or help when we show up in the world. And we were wondering if you have a story of when you've experienced imposter thoughts and what did you learn about yourself in that time?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's interesting because I never think of them as imposter thoughts. I think it's just part of growing and learning and developing that sometimes you're not so good at stuff and sometimes you get better at stuff. And sometimes you'll always have certain weaknesses and always certain strengths. So I have to admit, there's lots of topics around this whole sort of imposter syndrome. And I'm like, well, I don't know, is it just life? Is it just sort of what we do? But I suppose one of my moments, shall we say, I'd been in business for maybe about 18 months and not overly successfully. I was out there with everybody else trying to get work, and, occasionally I'd get a gig and most of the time I wouldn't. And there are certain things I know I am not very good at. I am not good at networking. I'm not good at selling. I have competitive as a weakness. So the idea of literally knocking on doors and trying to get work was horrible. I didn't like it at all. And because when I came to Australia, I didn't know people. I'd only been here 18 months when I pretty much sort of started my own business. So I didn't have contacts and networks and connections. Many people, when they start a consulting firm, they usually quit the role they're in as a consultant, and then they consult back to the company that they've just left is a pretty common scenario. I didn't have that. In fact, the company that I was working for, and I left just before, well, I didn't leave, I got made redundant, was Traveland. Everybody got made redundant because Ansett collapsed, they owned Traveland. So we're all out of a job and I couldn't consult back. So I literally started with no contacts, no networks, not really having a clue how a consulting firm worked. And I used to think that was a real downside because it took me probably a lot longer than anyone else, particularly because my strengths are not aligned to networking. I couldn't stand going to networking functions. I didn't like trying to build relationships. Rapport builder is a learned behavior for me. It's not something that lights me up. So I was about 18 months into my business and I'd had a particularly sort of tough week. I hadn't, work was not hugely happening. And I remember I'd been in Sydney having a meeting with yet another white male CEO leader, 20 years older than me, and once again left feeling about this big and literally feeling like I was some bimbo that had been walked and squished all over and thought, I don't know enough and blah, blah, blah. That was my sort of, I suppose, imposter thoughts of clearly I don't know enough. I'm not going to be able to do this. And I remember being on the bus on the way home and going across the Harbour Bridge, actually. And one of the first products we created was our Inspire Action cards. Now, if people haven't seen these, which I'm sure people haven't, all they are is a pack of cards, as in a deck of cards. You can play cards with them. And they have images on the back. So don't play poker because you can figure out which card is which. They have images on the back. And on the reason they're called Inspire Action cards is because on the red cards, they have inspirational quotes. And on the black cards, they have actions to do with positive psychology. And it was our very first product that we developed. And the minute we got them, the very first pack that came out of the box, I put in my handbag. And I literally carried it around wherever I went, my little pack of cards. So I was having this rough day. I was thinking, this is too hard. It's never going to be successful. I can't do this anymore. I'm not earning any money. This is ridiculous. I'm just going to go and get a job. And I'm sitting on the bus and I pull my pack of cards out, as I regularly did. And I chose an image based on how I felt. So on the backs with the images, I chose an image based on how I felt. And I flipped it over and it said, most people give up just as they're about to succeed.
Oh my gosh. How powerful
I
is
got
that?
goosebumps all over me. Oh, that is the best.
It was so perfect because to your point about imposter, I don't think it was necessarily imposter. I mean, I felt like I'd never know enough, so to speak, and I didn't have what other people had. But it was more about, okay, well, what can I learn from this? What can I do? And then when I got that, I thought, okay, well, I can give up and I can go and get another job. And there's no harm in that. I probably could have had a nice career doing that as well. But it was that thing that made me go, okay, well, maybe you don't know enough. Maybe you don't have the contacts. And I remember again having a conversation with somebody soon after that. And I said, I just don't know how it works. I don't know how consulting works. I've never worked in a consulting firm and whatever you. And he said to me, maybe that's a good thing. Because I think sometimes the reason we have these little imposter thoughts of I'm not good enough, etc., is because we're basing it on someone else's assumption.
Yes.
Rather than maybe what we want to do or what we think is an ideal thing to aim for or something innovative and new and different. So I don't know if that helps.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a wonderful point, because how often are people held back because they think they have to behave or think or do things in a certain way to fit in or conform or what have you? And what are we missing out on when that happens?
Yeah, and to be honest, Leanne, it happens all the time. And even though I know what I know, it still happens to me. COVID created a very big shift in our business. And I know maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm really grateful, because it's made me change things and do a few things differently. And whilst our business was successful before, it's been more successful since, because we've made changes that made me realize I was doing things based on what other people thought a consulting firm should do and the way we should set up. And we pretty much threw that out the window. And I love where we're at now. You know, I get off one of our little village halls. We call them village halls, not town halls, because we're only and sometimes I'm just absolutely overawed with my team, because we get off and everybody's like, you know, oh, so grateful that we get to do what we do and love this. And look at how well we've worked together over the last 2 years. And they're all like, wow, this is such an amazing team and what we do. And as I say, at one point I found myself going down the path of what other people thought a consulting firm should do and what I should do as the leader. And COVID enabled me to go, hang on, I've been wanting to do these 2 particular projects for 2 years. And other people in my business have suggested that it's not the right thing to do. And now we've done them. And it's been fantastic. So going with your gut sometimes, to be honest, based on your question, Leanne, is go with what you feel is right. You won't always get it right. You'll stuff up now and again, but at least then you've only kind of got yourself to blame, as opposed to what do we think other people should do? And we've got to fit in this box or way of being, which doesn't help us.
And when you show up like you are right now, so like I'm looking at you just going, any wonder it was successful, because your team had that energy to let that grow. Does that make sense? And not block it, you know, and it was wonderful.
Yeah. And if I think about, again, I firmly believe in the science. So even when COVID first hit, the whole team, we got together, obviously virtually. We did a whole appreciative inquiry and we said, okay, what are we awesome at? What are we great at? What's working? All of those sorts of things. And it just helped us flip things into where we do more of what we're great at and less of what's annoying.
And what's possible too, which then gives you that beautiful energy to chase after that. I really love that. So Sue, as a leading expert in supporting people how to harness their brain's potential and create those positive work cultures and increase performance and productivity, we're really curious to learn from you a little bit about your insights into how strengths can play a really big part in reframing our experiences with either those imposter thoughts or those inhibiting thinking patterns that go on.
One of the things, so often I'm doing certifications in the strengths profile or working with people from our LG certified trainer, master training sessions, etc. And when we talk about strengths, there are lots of different tools you can use. And I often talk to people about identify, use and develop. So we need to identify our strengths, and we can use a formal tool for that, or we can just do some really good strength spotting and be really good at noticing that energy in people. Then we need to use the strengths. So we need to figure out how I can apply them in my day to day. Sometimes it's nice, you've got your little report and you go, oh, that's great, but what are you actually doing to use them? The third one is then the develop piece. And if you think about how you can sort of do that, is about sort of think of it like a dimmer switch on a light. You don't put all your lights on in your house full blast in every room. You turn some off, you dial some down, you dial some up, etc. So I suppose the way I think about it from an organizational perspective is, if you can work with strengths, it will enable you to have performance conversations that are effective, even tough ones. And again, the best way I can think to describe this is an example. So I had a lady in my team quite a few years ago now, before we started using the strengths profile as part of our recruitment process. And soon afterwards, probably, I don't know, maybe 9 months or so afterwards, she did the strengths profile. And it was interesting because although she was okay at her job, she was okay at her job. And even though, you know, she did an okay job. She was nice to have around. She was a lovely person. She did okay. And we both kind of knew it, that she was okay. She wasn't great. And what was interesting is she did an okay job for a period of time. And then we sat down and we had a conversation along the lines of, tell me about your strengths. And I will give you an example. So for instance, in her spare time, she was using some of her unrealized strengths. So she was an artist, she painted, but I couldn't give her things that did that in her role because we were a much smaller business then, and we didn't have the opportunity to use her creativity and innovation in the ways that she would have liked. It was an admin job, it was an office job. It was required things like organizer and process and detail and whatever And we both realized these weren't things that energized her, and the things that did energize her with a small business I couldn't really give her. So we sat down and we had a really honest conversation about performance and said, look, you're okay at your job. I love having you here. You're okay. And it wasn't a surprise to her. She knew that she was okay. And but what we did is we then had a conversation of, well, okay, how can I help you? And one of the things we did in the interim before eventually she chose to move on, and I'll get to that in a moment, is we helped her organize an art exhibition. So we supported her in the evening. And she didn't believe she would sell anything. She ended up selling something like 15 paintings that night.
Wow.
And we were all there supporting her on, etc. So although I couldn't give it to her in her workplace, I could help her leverage her strengths outside. But eventually we did sit down and have a conversation that said, look, this is not, you are not lighting up every day when you come to work. And yes, you're doing an okay job. And to her credit, the following month when we sat down and had a catch up, she said, I've decided, and this was before COVID, she said, I've decided I'm going to leave. I'll give you 3 months notice, and I'm going to go to Europe, and I'm going to go around every art gallery in Europe, and then I'm going to get a job that suits my strengths. And she did. She ended up moving from Sydney to Melbourne when she got back, and she's now in a job that's in the architecture industry. And it's lovely to see that sometimes your job as a leader is to job craft within your role and look at team strengths for performance. And sometimes your role is to help somebody get something that lights them up. And I think for me, strengths, Alex Linley has a quote, strengths is the smallest thing you can do to make the biggest difference. And to your question there, Lisa, in an organizational setting, I think it's a useful win when you can help people identify the strengths. We've got some clients in Europe at the moment doing loads of work around strengths, and their roles and their structure is changing almost every month or so. They're restructuring teams. But I have watched this particular group really do amazing stuff of how quickly they can come together by sharing their strengths, by doing a quick team strength session, off and running with a project. And you watch them and I think, wow, wouldn't it be great if everybody was doing this?
Yes. So yes, and yes. But I think that, there is so much to learn from that for every organization and every person. And, that opportunity for that beautiful person that's with you is probably now flourishing more than she ever would have if she stayed or if she went into another role very similarly. And, that's the power of knowing your strengths and then being able to use them and even adapt them and develop them.
Yeah, and being honest about it, because there might be a situation where you can job craft. And as I say, if I take one member of my team, her role has transformed considerably, but that's because we still had the scope to leverage it. But if you don't, then what are you doing to help that person or yourself? If you're in a role that, is, and we often talk at the moment about burnout and things like that. When we do the strengths profile, it's really obvious because the learned behavior quadrant is the quadrant of burnout, because you are literally using too frequently the things that are draining to you. And then we wonder why people are burnt out. Whereas if you ask me to use my work ethic, my time optimizer, my narrator, my spotlight, if you ask me to use that every day, I'm not going to burn out. This is the stuff that lights me up.
Energy.
So, yeah.
Just on that, Sue, we have both done the strengths profile. Actually, we did it as part of the Master of Applied Positive Psychology and also your diploma. Before we talked to you, we were sort of swapping notes on our strengths. and my weakness was work ethic. And I think I want my curiosity solved here because I have a strong work ethic. But when I did that, did the survey, I was not in a good place work-wise. And so I'm interested to know how that might impact how our strengths show up.
Yeah, so when we go through the certification with people, we talk about this. It's one of the reasons I love the strengths profile. I know we're not here just to talk about that.
No.
But it's one of the reasons that I love it, because it's a dynamic tool. You know how you would have done numerous psychometrics, I'm sure many people have done numerous psychometrics, and it puts you in a box and it says you're a blue or a green or a red or a yellow, or you're a high this or a low this, or you're an extrovert or introvert. And it basically puts you in boxes, categories. I think there's a real problem with that, because I can guarantee you are not exhibiting exactly the same behaviors 10 years ago that you exhibit today. You change, you morph. COVID is a perfect example. The environment has changed around us, and we've had to step up in different ways that we haven't had to before. The thing about the strengths profile is it's designed to be dynamic. It's not going to change week to week. But to your point, if you're not in a great place work-wise, of course it's going to come up in your weaknesses. It stands to reason it's going to be there. If you look at the current statistics over the last 2 years, work ethic is 71% of the time in the learned behavior quadrant. That means people do work hard, but they don't get lit up by it. They don't go, woohoo, let me get up every morning and work hard. I do. It's my number 2 strength, which is why my whole life is around my work. And I don't say that in any negative way. I love my work. I live to work. I enjoy what I do. It's sculpted around my purpose, vision, and values. So work ethic is really high for me. But for most people, 71% of people, it's a learned behavior. Now, that doesn't mean they don't work hard. It means they do work hard, but they're not energized by it. And the thing is, you probably work hard now, but you're not working hard because of your work ethic. You're working hard because of something else, whether it's your service or your pride or your gratitude or your legacy or your mission, whatever there'll be other things that will bring you that energy. And that's what I love about strengths, is it highlights the fact that as human beings, every cell in your body changes, or most cells in your body change every 7 years. You're not the same person you were 7 years ago. So it's kind of the same with strengths. I can't say you are going to have these strengths from the day you're born to the day you die. And equally, we know there is some stability. Like I've taken mine 10 times in the last 11 years. And every time I have adherence and competitive as my weakness. So they haven't changed. Other ones, my number 1 learned behavior right now is adaptable, because for the first 18 months or the last 18 months, I've had to adapt so much that I'm kind of over it by now. So again, I love the dynamic nature of not just the strengths, but everything we think about in PosPsych. It's not one size fits all. There's a dynamic element to who we are as people and what works for us.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about mine and how they've changed it a lot. And I was just thinking about what you said about that change. And legacy has become, service has always been there for me, but legacy has become quite high up for me. And I'm really proud of that, because it's something it's been part of me for my life, I would say, through my mum and through kindness and gratitude and so forth. It's always there. The fact that I'm trying to create something, I've got incubator is one there that's trying to get that in, and planner in there. It's almost like everything's just becoming aligned at the moment, which is why I think I annoy you, Leanne, is I'm always incubating and you're completely the opposite. So we're always like chatting. Good partner.
That's why I love you, Lisa.
That's how it should work, shouldn't it? And it's also, to your point, Lisa, of knowing when, like I said, the dimmer switch, when to dial it up, when to dial it down. So incubator is a great strength to have, but at some point you've got to dial it down and do action or drive or
correct.
Something. If you just sit there and think all day, nothing's going to get done. Equally, if I've got action, sometimes I need to dial that down and stop and think.
So we are wondering if you could explain how neuroscience helps us to develop those psychological skills that help us to achieve personal growth.
Yeah, so I love the neuroscience side of things. I did my master's in Neuroscience of Leadership however many years ago. And for me, I'd sort of learned a bit before and sort of then really studying it and sort of taking the time, not from a how to be a neurosurgeon and, cut holes in your head sort of thing, how to really think about, well, how do I use this science to help me on a day-to-day basis? And it's really useful to think about how the brain is wired and some of those simple things and how we rewire our brain and how things change. And sometimes what we learn from a school perspective, it may not be entirely accurate. And it depends, of course, when you went to school. I don't think I went that long ago. And yet I remember learning pretty much that you got all your grey matter, and then after a certain point, somewhere in your sort of mid to late 20s, it was all kind of downhill from there. They would gradually die off. We know that's not true. People can grow new neurons into their 80s and 90s, which I think is really cool. I want to be growing new neurons. So therefore, I want to figure out, well, what helps me grow new neurons? How do I grow those new neural pathways? You mentioned about curiosity earlier. Sometimes when we get more learned in our formal education, we can become less curious because we know how it works. We've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, got 20 years experience. Yep, know this. And so our brain kind of just knows what's going to happen because we've seen it all before. Well, that's a real risk to us, because if you think about what curiosity does, curiosity helps us grow new neurons. Mm-hmm. If you think of a 5-year-old child, what's that? Why are we going here? Why are we doing this? I got stopped on my walk to the beach yesterday morning by this, 3-year-old. What's your name? Just randomly, what's your name?
Sweet.
Ironically, I was listening to an Audible book on quantum physics, so it took me a while to figure out what he was saying. And then he was like, what's that? As I took my AirPod out, he's like, what's that? Well, think about a 3, 4, 5-year-old. They are endlessly curious. And guess what? That's when they're growing the most neural connections. So I think neuroscience can teach us a lot. I teach a lot about social neuroscience. We know human connection is so important from the positive psychology literature. And yet, if we think about what we know from neuroscience, we can use what we know to help us build those connections more effectively, to support each other, to connect rather than tear down, to build better relationships, because often the relationships are the things that support us the most and also cause us the most distress in our lives, because people are so important to us. So I think there's just so much that neuroscience can teach us. The challenge for us is often the way neuroscience is presented. I've got a paper I've been trying to read. I think I'm on my 3rd attempt now of measuring different bits in the brain to do with how it links with the physiology of emotions. And I've got to the end 3 times and I'm like, nah, still not sure I'm getting it. Because so much of it, it's not written in an easy to connect with way, or people misunderstand it because it gets dumbed down so much. The mirror neurons, when that research came out, and the only reason that's in my head because I was emailing Marco Accaboni this morning, who's just fabulous, and people dumbed that down to, when you're doing sales training, you have to copy what everybody does and mirror them, and it's like,
and coaching.
And that's so not what mirror neurons is really saying. So for me, I like to say, well, what does the research actually tell us? Like the research at the moment to do with the microbiome and well-being through the brain and the neural pathways and the vagus nerve, etc., is fascinating. And yet again, we risk sometimes it getting dumbed down to take probiotics and then a pharmaceutical company reaps financial reward, when that's not actually entirely what's being said. So I love the neuroscience because I think it gets down to the cells, if you like, of what makes us tick and helps us understand it. And then if we can translate that into real, tangible, practical tools, for me, the science rescues me every time I'm about to say or do something I'm stupid or I'm, reacting in a particular way, and I come back to the science and it will give me the answer.
Like you, I get so excited about, the things that we learn in this space. It is so fascinating. It's so relatable. And there's so much we can learn about ourselves and others, from this science.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to Lisa, your question before about the neuroscience-y bit too is, yes, you can talk to people about gratitude, or you can talk to people about compassion, and we can talk to them about the science that's coming out of positive psychology. And then as soon as you put the neuroscience behind it, it's like, that's why. The broaden and build theory, Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory is fabulous.
Yeah.
You put the neuroscience behind it and people understand why the broaden and build theory works. Otherwise, it's just a theory.
Absolutely.
So that's where I think it connects beautifully.
It reminds me of, I'm working with 5 and 6-year-old children at the minute, and like you said, they're the ones who have the utmost curiosity and just want to keep asking questions. And I told them about a research project where to try and get their memory into their frontal cortex. And it was this man who I read his research paper and went, I don't think that's going to happen. He said that if you practice something for five times, but do it 4 times with your eyes open, and on the 5th one, you close your eyes. And then because it then changes, you have to visualize to be able to do it. So we had some experiments in our room, and the children were writing their first letter of, letter S or the formation of A. And so then they would do it. And then on the 5th one, they'd close their eyes and write the letter. And they were like, yes, I did it. But the whole part about explaining it, and even like their growth mindset, making mistakes, when they can go through and have a visualization of it and they know a little bit of the science, as they get older, it's, you can explain it further, but they are so excited. And then they're telling somebody else, or they're fist pumping because they made a mistake and they're ready to do something else. Kids love it. I know you're laughing, Leanne, but it's the best thing to see in kids, because they're like, yes, and they have got no fear of playing and experimenting and seeing the progress.
Well, it's funny you say that, Lisa, because obviously with our diploma, we run it face-to-face as an immersion, and we also run it obviously virtual as weekly sessions. And I love the weekly sessions in particular, because the next week people come back and sort of sometimes share what they've practiced. And I love those moments where you jump back on, and this has happened literally twice with 2 groups over the last couple of weeks, where you jump back on and say, what have your reflections been on the previous week? And somebody's gone, wow, I shared that thing we talked about, the energy chart, with somebody, and they tested it on their team, and oh my God, they really worked. And the number of times I get people say to me, wow, that really works. And I'm like, I know.
Yes. But it is so nice to see it in other people and the energy. And then when they're telling somebody else, and I hear it back from parents as well, that's when you have a ripple effect, that it's making an impact further than what your little arena is. And
Absolutely.
I love that.
And that's why I do what I do. It's not for what I do, it's what everybody else does.
Yeah.
And that's what I love, the stories I hear, the people whose lives have changed, the impact they have on the kids if they're a teacher, or their team if they're a leader, or whatever it happens to be, and the relationships that change. We had one lady who she did her gratitude assignment on her partner, and they'd been together 25 years, and she shared in her assignment that the relationship wasn't overly great. It got a bit sort of stale, and she commented that when she did this gratitude letter, etc., they ended up staying up, her and her partner stayed up talking until sunrise. And it had completely changed their relationship. I had one lady recently in one of the assignments changed completely the relationship with their stepchild, went from a distrustful, antagonistic relationship, literally with 2 things that she did differently of how she approached it, that ended up with the daughter literally crying on her shoulder and apologizing and building that trust, etc., just because she's used the science. And that to me is what makes the difference. It's not necessarily, I may not change the world as far as, would I like to change the political system, and would I like to stop wars?
Yes, please.
I love that. But it's not necessarily me that's going to do it.
No.
It will be, though, if we've got that ripple effect going on where people are changing the way they do things, maybe we can start to change the conversation a bit as well.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yes. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic.
No. I think there's a lot of us now that are doing it. And we actually had a few conversations just recently in our household. And I think the younger generations and next generations are starting to see that. And I think that they've got the buy-in as well. So I think, hopefully that ripple effect will be, magnified somehow, which is wonderful. So based on our conversation with you, Sue, today, can you recommend an app or a book or a podcast, TED Talk, anything you like for our listeners today, just to find out a little bit more about what we've been talking about?
It's a really good question, and I'm really apologize that I'm not up on podcasts and I'm not up on TED Talks. The only podcast I listen to, and this is both a neuroscience and a pos psych thing, is I'm learning Italian at the moment because I believe it's really important to stretch your brain. So I listen to an Italian podcast. I tend to read books rather than or research papers rather than TED Talks, but I appreciate TED Talks can be really useful for sort of nutting things down into simple things. Some of the books that I love, it's a little old now, I still love love Social by Matt Lieberman. It's still one of my favorite books on social neuroscience.
I haven't read that one.
I love that. If I think about more recent ones, Katie Milkman's work, How to Change, it's a great book. She's been doing research for a long period of time, and it's a good book on changing habits. Most people have heard of James Clear's Atomic Habits. That's pretty popular, but I love Katie Milkman's work on How to Change. I've got on my bedside table 7 books at the moment. One's by Bear Grylls about some, superhero who's going to save the world type thing. Which is my take the brain out stuff. And then I've also got Katie Milkman's that I've pretty much finished but still sitting there. I've got Todd Kashdan's book, The Art of Insubordination. And one of my favorite people in the research space is Antonio Damasio, his book, Knowing and Feeling. So yeah, I tend to go with the books more than anything. And as I say, even on Audible, I'm actually listening to Sean Carroll's book on quantum physics, which most of it's going over my head, which is awesome. I love it when I get something I don't understand.
That was like me in my Masters of Applied Positive Psych. For the first probably 3 weeks, I had to read the sentence. There'd be 5 brand new words that I'd never heard of before. Have to get the dictionary out or my iPhone and try and work it out, then read it. And then it took like hours just to read one article. Then I'd have to try and read another one. I was like, anyway, I got better at that.
Well, a couple of years ago, I went to the Neuroscience School for Advanced Studies in Venice for 3 weeks. And they said it's basically leading neuroscientists from around the world doing a week on different topics. And they sent me papers beforehand. And I remember I was flying to Johannesburg and I thought, I know, I'll read some on the flight. I've got nothing else to do. And I literally, because I had no Wi-Fi, I couldn't even get past the title of one of them. I literally couldn't understand the title. So that didn't help. But I found myself in Venice and I did a week on the microbiome. I did a week on social neuroscience or social decision making. And I did a week on sort of the cognitive side of decision making. And during that week, so it was 3 whole weeks, during that period, I met 100 people over the course of the 3 weeks, either the neuroscientists themselves or the people attending. And what was really interesting is I was the only person out of those 100 people who didn't have a PhD, who didn't work for a university, who wasn't a researcher, who wasn't a professor. I was so completely out of my depth. And I had the best 3 weeks ever.
I was going to say, they probably loved it. Did you ask lots of questions?
Well, to start with, I didn't. But what was really interesting is the microbiome was the first week. And I'm a big believer that what I've read, the microbiome and our well-being are very closely linked. And so, of course, I was trying to connect it to things. So I think we got to about day 4 or 5 and I sort of said, bearing in mind, we had Nobel Prize winning neuroscientists here. And I put my hand up and I said, so how does this link with Ellen Langer's view of mindfulness versus mindlessness? If we're more mindless about what we do or more mindful, will it change our microbiome? And they literally looked at me like I'd gone completely mad. And they said, who's Ellen Langer? And then a bit later I said, well, how does this link to the Broaden and Build theory? Because if you think about Barbara Fredrickson's Broaden and Build theory, we know that positive emotions change our physiological responses, et cetera, et cetera. And they're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. So the good thing is that was back in 2019, I think, or 2019. Yeah, 2019. And I said at the very end of my week with the microbiome specialists, the leading neuroscientist around the world, John Cryan, he's fabulous. I said to him, no, it's 2018. I said to him, you people need to talk to the researchers in the wellbeing space because you are doing the same thing from a different angle.
Yeah, they're
and the
there.
thing was at the IPA conference, the World Congress in Melbourne, they actually had John Cryan as the...
yeah, he was good.
Yeah. And now what we know, if you think about depression, anxiety, things like that, it is hugely linked to the microbiome.
And how, that is such a fascinating conversation to get deep in. I think you did a talk for Collective Insights.
I did.
And I came to Sydney to see that. And I was fascinated just, hearing you share all about that and the story too. That must have been just a wonderful experience. And then seeing John IPA,
Congress,
it really made you stop and think.
Yeah. Well, if you look at, again, some of the popular books have taken it a little too far and suggest lots of probiotics and prebiotics and various other things. We had Caitlin Cowan, who was one of John Cryan's sort of PhD researchers many years ago. She came on our Learn with Sue doing a session with us. And she's, again, absolutely amazing woman researching this space around the microbiome. And she says, I don't take probiotics because mostly taking probiotics is like swallowing money. Literally, by the time you get them out of the fridge, they're already not working, or by the time they've gone through the acid in your stomach, they're not working. So what are we doing around these sorts of things? And there's still so much we don't know. We've only identified something like 40,000 species so far of bacteria. But what we do know is your gut bacteria communicates with your brain in literally seconds. We know that it is hugely linked to things like depression, anxiety, as well as other non-communicable diseases. And I think it's early days, but what's going to be interesting is if we can get into some more personalized medicine where we help people look at what pathogens or commensals, as in the good and not so good bacteria that they've got in their gut, that can really help change things from a mental health perspective. You know, we've never seen it as something like that. And yet our well-being is very much linked. One of our diploma students, she's a neuroscientist, developing an app around how we can test our microbiome through an app on our phone.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Which is amazing what we'll be able to know. And I've had my human DNA tested, and I've had my microbial DNA tested, and I've made changes based on both of those that are unique to me. I wouldn't necessarily say everybody else should make the same changes, but they're unique to my microbial DNA and my human DNA, which is pretty cool when we get down to that sort of stuff.
Wow. Oh, we could talk about that forever, but I know we only have so long. So there's so
many fabulous topics.
there is. But so if people want to connect with you or find out more about your wonderful work, where can they find you?
So they can either find it on langleygroup.com.au or learnwithsue.com.au. They're probably the two main ones. If you want to find out about the diploma, if you just Google Diploma of Positive Psychology or look at the Langley Group Institute.com, you'll find us there. But please, I love it when people reach out. One of my favorite things is questions. I love curiosity when people ask questions around things. So I hope people will reach out.
I'll probably bomb you with questions. No. Only joking. So one of the greatest gifts that we've been giving our listeners is a little bit of a self-care strategy. And we're just wondering, have you got a favourite self-care strategy that you like to have that you think our listeners might really, really enjoy?
Well, I have lots of self-care strategies because I am a firm believer in the saying, positive psychology is not a spectator sport. We can't just do a master's, do a diploma, read the theory, read the books and go, oh, my well-being's going to go up. It's not. You actually have to do stuff. And I don't think people always want to hear that. They want, sometimes we want the bolt of lightning of our life is going to change, or someone's going to, give us $2 million and we'll be happy. So my rule is treat yourself as a scientific experiment. Don't go, I can't do mindfulness after the first session. You practice it for 8 weeks. You see if it makes a difference to your well-being. If it doesn't, you go, that's nice. I'll use it when I need it, but not interested. That's what mindfulness is for me. I'm not a mindfulness practitioner. And yet when I had a moment of grief at some point 18 months ago, some stuff happened and I was grieving, I absolutely looked up a mindfulness practice on honoring grief. And I did 15 minutes and it was really helpful strategy. But then test other things. If the research tells us journaling makes a difference, which it does, writing stuff down, expressive writing, journaling, is a whole heap of research around it. Practice it for 8 weeks. Notice, does it help? If it does, keep it up. So I suppose my piece of advice is not that I'm going to say this strategy will make you better, because I don't believe in that. Everybody will have different ones. But what I do believe in is treat yourself as a scientific experiment. Practice it for 8 weeks. Notice how you feel, pay attention to it. And if I had to consider one thing that underpins all the others, it would be what I consider brain and body basics, which is eat, sleep, and exercise. If you can't get anything else right, get those 3 things in place, because once they fall over, it gets much harder to do the other ones. So for me, underpinning that treat yourself as a scientific experiment is get your brain and body basics of eat, sleep, and exercise in place.
Thank you so much. They're beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Susie. That was such a beautiful conversation to have, and we are so grateful for everything that you've shared. I feel really, really energized to go into the rest of the afternoon. So thank you very, very much.
You are very welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Leanne.
I could have spoken to her for the rest of the day.
I feel energized now.
So do I. Wow. And just so real. I love that she has such a passion for that neuroscience and bringing that into life. But, I think what her main strength to me is not only that zest and that energy and that real compassion and caring part, but she's able to translate that neuroscience and all of that really amazing research into everyday practice. And that she champions people to live their best life with their strengths and how they can really adapt them and keep using them and develop them.
That's
I just think that's beautiful.
Embracing our strengths, embracing the strengths of others, seeing it, spotting it, and helping people to build, whether it be within ourselves or others. There's so much that we gain as a collective from that.
Yeah, and I think, I can't remember the name of the person who's the researcher behind this, and I'm going to get the figures wrong, but they talk about when you're giving that feedback to a colleague, but if it's based on their weakness, then their performance declines something like 28% or 27% roughly. But when you give feedback to a colleague that's actually about their strengths, it's nearly a 40% increase from where they're at. So it's a no-brainer for leaders to think about what it is they're doing to enhance and develop your employees as people and to find their strengths. And if you don't know what they are, then we need to identify it with them, spot it more often in other ways, and how can you amplify that so it's developing further?
And I agree. And, when you know the strengths of others, I think about a team that I worked with, helping the team know each other's strengths. The dynamic changed significantly from, they're against me, to they're helping me to be my best, do my job in the best way possible.
It's removing the fear, isn't it? The fear of having to be like someone's telling you to be, rather than stepping into your authentic self with your best self that has your strengths, and that someone's actually championing you to do that.
Absolutely. And that then feeds into that psychological safety, which, there is so much more emphasis and awareness on that now, and that really helps.
One of the big things, it's just been going around and around in my head for a while, but Susie really picked this up. So in the fact that when we're being the scientist ourselves and experimenting, then we know what's right for us and what's not working. So drop that off a little bit and keep learning. And I think back to the very, very beginning episode where we talked about the work of Dr. Basima Tufek's work, where she's talking about the changes in whether you have an imposter moment or a thought, and how you can have that beginner's mind, which Adam Grant talks about in his book. And when you are leaning into learning instead of that fear of not wanting to make any changes, then anything's possible.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. We're going to call it back. Well, have a great day, everyone.
And thank you for listening to the Imperfect Us podcast. As always, we are extremely grateful to our executive producer, Brenton Ainsworth, for helping us to put this episode together. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with someone you care about, and we would be grateful if you could rate this podcast on iTunes. To continue the conversation and see what we're up to, you can connect with us on LinkedIn. Just search for Imperfect Us. Bye for now.